Good evening. See you all. So, as Garo was saying, we just celebrating Guru Purnima.
Said it wrong.
Pardon me?
I said it wrong.
Oh, okay. Guru Purnima. Which is a tradition in India to have a day in the year when you honor a teacher, teachers. Good, thank you. We we were a little late, actually. It should be on the last full moon in July, the middle of the summer. But it's actually, we were away during the last full moon, so we did it a week later. So it's a time to think about what is the phenomenon of a teacher and what is the what are the traditions in different parts of the world about the relationship between a student and a teacher. And so this is a point on which there is a huge difference between East and West. And it's a cultural difference, cultural variation, I suppose. In the East, especially in India, the institution of the teacher is something that is considered very sacred and very central to people's lives. So, though I know things are changing in India, especially in the big cities where there's more westernization. But in the time that, most of the time that I spent in India, which is now a half a century ago, it was still very much a part of life. So each family really had a guru. And I say that word with some trepidation because I know in the West, for the most part, that's a pejorative term now. It's become a pejorative term. So you say, what, he thinks he's a guru, or he's some guru, quote unquote, from India. But that's just another reflection of how different our attitude is about this phenomenon of teacher and student in the West from what it is and has been in the East. So, I mean, when I was with my teacher in India, frequently families would come, you know, I mean, the parents and the grandparents and the children, and they would all gather around Swamiji, and he would ask how they were, and he would give advice, and he would counsel them about their spiritual practices and so forth. And so anytime you went into someone's home, they would always have a picture of their guru, you know, and so I don't know of a similar tradition in this country, unless there was a time when the minister, you know, of the church was kind of the shepherd for the sheep of the congregation, and people would look to him for advice, but not so personal as what has existed in India, where the family looked to this person for guidance. And Swami Rama had many families that considered him their guru. Some of them very simple people, some of them royalty in Nepal, for example. And I met many of these people. What I'd like to accomplish in this little discussion is to clarify the meaning of the term guru, and then and maybe see what ideas people have about this for yourself, if you've had any experience with a teacher that you felt was primary in your life. Swami Rama would always explain that the term guru means that which dispels darkness. And that refers, of course, to the guidance of the teacher who helps you find your way out of darkness and confusion into a direction and purpose in life and so forth. But he also stressed that that the guru, without meaning outside yourself, the person who was the guru in your experience, was not the real guru, because the real guru was inside of you. And it was considered a elemental force in the universe. So the elements in the universe, in the tantric cosmology, were earth, water, fire, air, and ether or space. And those were considered the tattvas, those elements, which are not literally earth, but those things that are solid, not literally water, but the things that flow and move easily, and not literally air, but that which is gaseous and fills us, and so forth. So these names translated into English sound trivial or like silly, but actually this refers to a deep understanding of how the universe is composed, what comprises the universe. And so those were called the tattvas, 5 tattvas. And each is related to one of the chakras and so forth. But there's another tattva, and there's another tattva called guru. And that is that stream of awareness and consciousness that comes down to guide us and enlighten us. So the role of the embodied guru, the person who is a guru, was simply his job was to put you in touch with the inner guru. And to the extent that he managed to do that, he was successful. And if he didn't do so well, then he was not a very good guru. But it was not he wasn't a divine figure or anything like that. But he was the person who was to put you in touch with, help you find your way to connect internally to that inner guru, that universal flow of guidance and wisdom. So when we say teacher, it means something different in the West. And basically what it seems to have meant most of the time is someone who conveys information. So yesterday we had a number of young people here for the Guru Purnima, and I was talking with one of them and said, well, there seems to be a kind of teacher phobia in the US, you know, like not this idea that, well, someone's going to mess with your mind and you can't trust them, and you know they're up to no good, you know. And so people have a kind of aversion to thinking, well, oh, I'm placing myself under the guidance of the teacher. And he said, well, maybe it's devices, you know, the things, you know, that people think, well, who needs a teacher? I can find out whatever I need to know from the cell phone or whatever, you know, and click, 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 click. So teachers are obsolete. But really, can you find out what is your path from the cell phone? Can you get the personal guidance that helps you find your way, not just the way that everybody does? Because it's a very individual thing. And it's the teachers in that tradition. It's the teacher's job to understand the student's uniqueness and to help him or her find their way toward what they're here to do, to help them with those basic questions we talked about last year. Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going? You know, and you can't read that on a computer screen. You know, I mean, it's like it's different for everybody. You know, so how could you get the information for you? And so that's a very sacred job. And as I was reviewing some of the writings that have been done about the phenomenon of the teacher in India, that it was considered something really sacred. And the teacher had a sacred responsibility to the student, and the student had a sacred responsibility to the teacher, to listen and receive and not to argue, but to really accept the guidance that was offered in order to find that wisdom within himself. So that's kind of a phenomenon that isn't really widely understood in our society. I mean, there are people who've had some familiarity with that, but in general, it's not something that people are aware of. So, you know, at this time of Guru Purnima, we honor our teachers, but we also honor their teachers and their teachers, you know, because the kind of tradition that's being passed down is very individual, and it is very it's not, what do they call it? What do they say? You can't scale it up. You can't scale it up. Is that the right term? You know, to just, you know, do more like, well, why can't this teacher just, you can put it online and you can charge so much for it, you know, wow, you have 100,000 people that have that, this person as their teacher. But that's not really what's being talked about. So the learning from the teacher comes not from the conveyance of information, though there may be some information conveyed at certain points, but it comes from the guidance, but it also comes because every good teacher realizes that the way the student learns is by example. So the teacher can really only effectively convey the teachings by living them himself. And so that's, you know, that was a joke when I was grew up in South Carolina, and people talked about, well, the preacher, and the preacher says, well, do as I say, not as I do. Well, that wouldn't fly in India. You know, it didn't fly too well in South Carolina either, but and it was kind of said tongue in cheek, but actually there was a lot of truth in it, because the teachers would say one thing and do something else. So the real the real impact of the teaching is that the person teaching you is leading his life, living his life on the basis of what he's teaching you. And so you see it and you experience it embodied and lived. And that's something you can imitate, you can follow, you can try it out for yourself. And so at the time of Guru Purnima, I'm always struck by the miracle that the teachings I received can be followed back, 25, 30 generations of teachers. And that each of these teachers lived what they were teaching. And that seems almost impossible, especially to us who grew up in the West. It's like, no, what are the odds that could happen? That many people could teach and live that and live it and live it and live it and live it. And, I don't know how much that tradition is continuing even in India. I know it is to some extent, but Westernization undercuts a lot of that because people think, oh, well, that's old fashioned. We don't need that. Young people want to be like people in the West. Not always, fortunately, but not infrequently. So there is a kind of awe involved in this, the awe of having the influence and the input from someone who, first of all, is aware on a level that you're not, that is aware of dimensions of consciousness and dimensions of existence that you're not familiar with. There's an awe there. And then there's an awe in that knowledge, that awareness of these other dimensions of life and existence can change the way you live your life, because if you have that awareness, you're going to do things differently from people who don't have that awareness. They're living on the basis of a very little bit of understanding of the world and understanding of what life is about. So there's an awe that the teacher has that awareness, and then there's an awe that it can be available to you, and that his guidance and tutelage is to help you reach that yourself, to reach those realms that not only do you not know about, but you don't even know you don't know about, to quote the landmark expression. So naturally, if the teacher is attending to you and giving you his attention, and he is studying you. Swamiji used to say, the job of the teacher is to study the student. So the teacher is not just giving you information and saying, do this, do this. He's studying you so he can understand where you are in your inner space and in your existence, so he can help guide you toward discovering the resources within. So the teacher is studying the student. And so that's a huge luxury, to have someone who's devoted to understanding you, and on a deep level. So there's an awe for that someone is actually in the world doing that for me. So there is an awe that the student appropriately and naturally will feel in the presence of the teacher. That doesn't mean that he thinks the teacher is God, and it doesn't mean that he shouldn't think for himself. And one of the great annoyances that teachers have to deal with is that students want them to tell me what to do about this, tell me what to do about this, tell me what to do about that. And so the good teacher will usually say, not give out all that advice, because the student has to learn to make choices for himself. Um, but then when the student does get the teacher to tell him what to do, he manages to do that. In our culture, the first thing the student wants to do is say, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what I want to." So the good teacher knows better than that. So he doesn't, very rarely answers those questions of how should I do, what should I do. And I was thinking about a young man who was a student of my teacher, and he was always saying, wanted Swamiji to tell him what to do all the time. And, much of the time, well, on one occasion I remember, Swamiji said, okay, you're going on a trip. Do not travel on Saturday the 28th. And so he went to visit someone, and he decided, well, I want to go back, and on the 27th. And so either he didn't remember, but Swamiji was pretty emphatic because I heard him say it. And so he went on the 27th, and he got in a car wreck and died. So, we watched things like that, and we thought, I think I better pay attention when he tells me what to do, which is rare enough. And I was in charge when Swamiji was away, and sometimes when he was there, I was in charge of this institution, which was large. And so I was always wanting him to tell me what to do, but he was usually letting me make my own mistakes that I could learn from very easily. So yeah, the natural relationship between a person and a guide of this sort is bound to be one of deep respect and awe and receptivity. Why have a teacher if not going to listen to what he's saying and use it? So yeah, those are some thoughts about the student-teacher relationship. And so I'm kind of stumped, because if I say student-teacher relationship, people think, well, I've had many teachers. So if I say student-guru relationship, people think, oh, this is a guru thing. Whoa, I don't have to do that. So it doesn't really get talked about very much. But I thought this was an appropriate time to bring up the topic of student-teacher relationship. And so I'm really curious to know who of you have had a teacher that you had such a relationship with, and how did that go, and what did you learn from that? And if anybody has had. Yeah, so who would like to share? Oh, just a minute. I think we're getting speaker. Does it work?
Battery 90%.
Yeah, it should be working. Arbella, were you going to talk? Oh, you lit up. So maybe.
No, I wasn't intending to. I thought I would listen for a little while.
Okay, sure.
So I'll go. This is Shiv. As I was growing up, like you said, my father had a guru. It was the principal of Ramakrishna Mutt. He was married. He had grandkids, but he was leading a very austere life. He translated a lot of the Sanskrit scriptures. He was extremely well known. And everybody called him Anna. Anna means brother in Tamil, elder brother. A lot of families used to come and visit him. So we were one among them. And so I remember when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, my father used to take me to his house. They used to cook. They used to say, you want to play? And I used to play with his grandkids outside. And then at the age of 10, he taught me a few mantras, the Mula mantras, Sri Vidya Upadesham. So one day he said, come here, I'll teach you something. And he made me sit down and repeat the mantra. And that's how it started. So
Wow.
yeah, that's my small story. But I think that all the things that you described when I say the word guru, it was love.
Yeah.
There was nothing beyond that. It is, and I feel that it's more than even your father and mother. Your father and mother bring you up in life and teach you the values and everything else. And I think guru is the one who spiritually guides you. So when we say even the mantras, Matrudevo Bhava, that means your mother is God. Pitradevo Bhava, your father is God. But they say Acharya Bhevo Bhava. That means even beyond your mother and father, the guru comes beyond that because it's appealing to your soul and your consciousness. You take on this earthly form when your father and mother are there, when you procreate, and they're there to help you. But your guru carries along, helps you in your consciousness beyond that. So that's why the pedestal is even higher than that for a guru.
So it must have been a kind of grounding or stabilizing thing to have that influence in your family. That
Absolutely, absolutely. We went through so many things of ups and downs in our life. The guru was the only person who was constant.
Yeah.
And it's more than counseling. It's almost like we can pour our emotions out. And the guru is there to say, absorb, and the small things he says, right, are it's very healing. It's very healing. I remember my mother, we lost our grandfather. It was a lot of loss in the family, but he was always there. And he would always say, it's okay, things will progress, don't worry about it. So you will come past this. Yeah.
So when I hear you saying all that, I just think, well, it must be a very different society that emerges when people have that stabilizing effect in their intimate family life. They have this person and this guidance must be a different kind of
you're absolutely right. But I don't see that anymore. I mean, the kind of austerity and the kind of people, the gurus who live by example, it's very hard to find them in this day and age.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful and very inspiring. And a glimpse into the life of India, a couple decades ago. The traditions were followed more. I think probably still in some small cities, towns, and countryside, people may still follow some of the traditions. I like to think so. Thank you. Who else has an experience they'd like to share?
So this is going to be an odd question, but I think like in today's society or thinking back, I think of grandmothers as those people who guide and who are there. I mean, if we're lucky enough to know our grandmothers, but they're often a force like that, right? They'll tell you when you did something wrong. They'll be there to support you. And so I'm just curious about that, the difference or the same or how that is.
Yeah, well, I think that I should actually ask Shiv, but I would say India is by and large a rather matriarchal culture. And the mother and the grandmother certainly command a lot of respect. And they do serve a lot of that function. But I think that what the guru offers is a little different because it's more about the spiritual path per se, and putting that at the center of things. I don't know, does that make sense to you, Shiv?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the grandmother in our household, yeah, was something, all the family related matters, setting you right. It's similar to what is out here, I think, to a large extent as we are growing up.
Mhm.
But the guru is different. The guru is someone who is helping you in your spiritual life, who's also seeding the thoughts of spirituality in you
Yeah,
at the right time, at the right age. There is a time for everything, and the guru knows when is the right time to engage. And seed those thoughts.
yeah,
And I think you said it right. I mean, I think they observe each one's behavior quite a bit. The guru does, and they're able to guide certain people in a certain way.
yeah. We're all different. Great. And yes, Arabella, I want to hear about
Okay, I
you.
will speak because I have a perspective that is not altogether unique. I know that you had a similar experience. I had the great good fortune to meet my guru. Let's say, I guess I have to say my guru when I was 20 years old. And took initiation with him and studied with him for 25 years. The experience is very different from teacher. I think of teacher more in the guidance role, the individual who does all those things that you described, helps one to find one's own inner guru, helps one to, or helps to create a container with the student in which learning can occur. Learning that is embodied and integrated and aligned. The guru experience was very, very different. It was very much a, like we wouldn't even look in his eyes unless we were invited to. You know, there was so much awe and respect between the chela and the guru. And I can remember when I first started studying with you, Rudyji, I said to you, this is going to be confusing for me at times because I had a different relationship with my previous teacher. And it has been at times somewhat confusing to me, but it's okay. It's all part of the thing. But the experience of, I think that that's such a unique experience in the West. And I can remember saying to you recently, we live in such amazing times that you and I were able to, you know, meet and have that relationship with guru, the external guru, who helped us to develop the relationship with the internal guru. So that's a little bit of my story.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's great. It's the firsthand experiences are helpful here. So I guess it would be interesting to hear from any of you. How has it gone with you in your search for the inner guru? Because some people do find the inner guru without the help of an outer guru. It's more difficult, it's said, but it's still possible. Like I remember Swamiji talking about Walt Whitman, that he was enlightened, and there were no people playing the guru role around him, but he found that within himself, brought it out into the world. And there are many other examples too, so many, but Anybody have comments or thoughts about your personal experience in that direction? Yeah. How about it?
I just want to make I'll make a brief comment. I didn't even know the inner guru was possible until I met you.
Mm,
You helped me to identify and recognize and meet that inner guru. And for that, I will always be grateful.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's really interesting, because that's not to say that all the experience you had when you didn't realize that was possible prepared you for to find it when it was possible. And that so this kind of, it is two different modes of functioning. One is to be the guru, and the other is to be the guru who's helping you find your inner guru. And they can meld together as they did for you, and that's wonderful. Hmm. So where are we? Yes, Jeff. I mean,
Hi. I guess prior to starting to work with you, my primary experience was Zen teachers.
Hmm.
And the pieces of the puzzle there there were multiple teachers, and B, well, one in particular was quite good at meeting me where I was at, so he was paying attention at that level. There was only one route, in some sense, the Zazen koan route that he had to offer, and if that route wasn't for you, then there wasn't any other flexibility there. He had no alternative routes to offer. And so while remains a very good friend, unable to, I felt he was unable to help me along my path and terribly far. I mean, I don't want to say he did nothing for me. That's not true, but that there were limits there. So.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. That's an interesting comparison, because the Zen tradition is a very strong one, and but I think that's correct, that generally that personal guru relationship is not so much a part of Zen, so there's a whole process that you go through with a teacher, with a guru, this kind of. And one of my fascinating experiences was that I really did take it seriously. I really did listen to my teacher and try to take under advisement everything that he offered, though I couldn't remember it all, but I did most of it. And I had no qualms about his integrity. I mean, I knew that he was very aware on levels that I couldn't understand. But I thought, well, whatever he says is the truth. And so I took it very clearly, that was the truth. This is a separate issue, really, from his guidance to me, helping me follow my path. Well, no, it wasn't. I mean, the way he worked with it actually was part of that. But what happened was, at a certain point, he started telling me things that I could easily verify were not true. And I was just totally blown away, like, well, what did you say? You know, and I just went home and brooded over it, like, well, how would he say that? That's not true. And then he kept doing that. So what that did was kind of cut the umbilical cord in a way. And then I had to start really thinking for myself, which was, I'd gotten lazy in a way, you know, that I was just relying on his perspective and everything. And suddenly I couldn't do that. And I felt horribly betrayed and upset. And finally I did what I had to do, which was kind of get in the driver's seat, you know. And then that sort of faded away. He quit doing that after it wasn't necessary anymore. But there are so many things that the teacher does that, you know, we don't understand and that we are baffled by, and we struggle with trying to understand, well, why did he do that? And so that's a big part of the journey. And but you don't get that unless you start with the respect and devotion and, you know, really commitment to following this person and what he offers. And only then will these techniques work to get you stronger, and then cut you loose. And then there are many possibilities, and there's no predictable pattern because everybody's different. Every student's different, and every teacher is different to some extent. So it was, my journey with my teacher was a long and bumpy road, but it was filled with discoveries and awakenings that made my life consistently more exciting and rewarding and fulfilling. And so, you know, I stuck with it for a long time, 20 years. 20 years I worked with him very closely, hours every day. So this was really the old-fashioned kind of relationship where really was a lot of personal attention and personal work. So, you know, I can only say that I'm, you know, kind of, as Arabella did, that we're very fortunate to have this experience, and very sad to see that that process seems to be fading out in so many places. And you know, people can have, you know, follow their spiritual path and have a wonderful life without that. But wow, you know, so much more is possible when all those experiences and ingredients are present. So I don't know where this is all going on the planet. Some of you've heard me say that a friend who is a yoga teacher, Indian friend, he lives in New Delhi, and he's a yoga teacher. And I think, Arabella, you met him, Navtej. And he's friends with the woman who wrote the book on Madhu Khanna wrote the book on the yantras, and she's a great authority on Indian spirituality, and she's part of the intelligentsia and artists and teachers in Delhi, and so he's friends with her. And he asked her one time recently, Madhu, are there any of the great teachers left? The kind that we're talking about. And she said, no. She said the last was Swami Rama. And he had passed away, you know, some years before that. So that may not be true, but to her knowledge, that was the case. And there may be still teachers back in the mountains and back in places that we don't know about. But I feel like it would be a huge loss to the planet for that tradition to die out, you know. So
Swami Rama, this is David Salit. I'm curious if Swami Rama would refer to himself as a guru. Like how would he relate to that word?
he didn't use it a lot, and he I remember he would say, well, if people ask me, are you enlightened? He says, well, then I have this awkward situation where if I say no, I'm lying. If I say yes, I'm egotistical. So he kind of wouldn't answer it. Sort of answered it, but not that answer it. But he would always, if people asked about the guru question, he would always say, the guru is within. And my job is to help you find the guru within. That force which is the light that dispels darkness. And so that was his way of answering the question. But he didn't expect his students to call him Guruji. Well, that's like respected guru. But some did, and he didn't say, don't say that. But he was not one for bringing Indian traditions into American culture. He kind of wouldn't allow images of himself or other teachers to be put in the spaces. And he was like, no, we'll do this in a very simple way. But functionally, for many of us at least, he was clearly a guru. And for other people, maybe he was just a teacher. Yes, Arabelle.
As comparison, Pir Vilayat, who was my Sufi teacher, the first part of his name, Pir, was his title. It signified an extremely high initiation. So that was his title, and we called him Pir Vilayat. But if he were asked, who is the teacher here? Which he was never asked that because it was so apparent he was the teacher, but he would always refer to Murshid, who was at the same initiatory level of Pir Vilayat. The title is Pir O Murshid. So he would refer to Murshid, who was his spiritual teacher.
Yeah. Right. So I'm here representing his teachings, the message. Yeah. And I often say that, of course, that what I'm giving you is what I got from the teacher. And that was the arrangement. I'll teach you if you pass it on. Okay, so I'm still doing that. Yeah. So it's like I'm not able to offer you a solution about this issue about gurus and teachers. But I am hoping that this just brings into awareness more of the possibility of how to live on the planet and what culture might include ideally and how we might move in that direction. I don't know, but we can. Or not. Maybe that's not in the cards right now. Any other people have thoughts that they would like to share? Let's see this. Well, one more little piece of information. That was one of the things that people learned in India back a generation or so ago, was how do you decide who should be your guru? How do you choose a teacher? And And there were certain criteria, like can the person sit up straight and comfortably and stay still, or is he fidgety and and if he's fidgety and uneasy, then you probably don't want to rely on that person. Can he, does he represent the values and that you hold dear, and does he exude love and care, and does he work toward the well-being of those around him, and so forth. But I mean, there were criteria that you could apply, and yeah, I think of that some of you have heard me tell this story. I may have said it on this Zoom series, but I don't think so. I'm not sure. Anyway, there were a couple of young women who came to the Himalayan Institute from somewhere in Wisconsin, I think it was. Anyways, yeah, Midwest, and they were twins, and they were both very overweight, and their father was a doctor, and he didn't really have that much time for them, so he sent them to us, and they were probably in their 30s, around 30, 35 years old. And so Swamiji was working with them and guiding them, and he had them on a diet, which was his weight loss diet, which was very simple. But it didn't seem to make any difference. They didn't lose weight, and they didn't seem to be making any progress. And so one day I was walking down the hall, and he was talking with one of them, Mary, and Mary and Barbara. And so they were talking, and then all of a sudden I heard, whap, and he slapped her across the face really hard. And I was shocked. I was totally shocked. Like, oh my God, I've always seen him be so caring, and so, so I went into this tailspin of doubt and distress, and it was just horrible. But I didn't say anything to anyone. I was just wrestling with it internally. So a few days later, Mary came in to me for a medical appointment, because I was seeing them both to guide their remedies, the medicines and remedies and things they took, not allopathic medicines. So I said, well, how are you? And she just lit up, and she said, well, this amazing thing happened. Yeah, I think I know what you're going to talk about. And she said, well, I was having this conversation with Swamiji, and I was sort of slipping into these old patterns, I guess. And all of a sudden, he slapped me. And I went, like I was there. And she said, it was the first time I really believed that anyone cared about me. And she said, everything feels different now. And within a few months, all the weight was gone. Barb was still overweight, her sister. It was really astounding. And Mary became this almost ethereal being. She was just beautiful and radiant, and like, wow. So the end of the story is kind of difficult, but they were in a car. This was probably a year later. They were in a car going to Honesdale to errands, and it was an icy day, and the car slid off the road and hit a tree, and Mary was killed instantly. And Barb was seriously injured and ended up in the hospital. And so I went in to see her because, you know, everyone was pretty sure she was going to die. And she was in a coma, is the report. So I went in and I took her hand and she opened her eyes and looked at me and she said, Doctor, I said, how are you? And she said, Dr. B, I'm trying to decide whether I should go with Mary or not. And I said, just do whatever you feel right. And she recovered. And she went on to lead a very interesting life, but she never lost the weight, you know, but she had a different path. But that, what I thought was this horrible abuse turned out to be an act of love that she was transformative for her. So, you know, it's always a mistake for the student to judge the guru. That was my lesson. You know, oh, you think you know so much. You think you're past judgment on this person, and it's not a rewarding attempt to move. It doesn't get you anywhere helpful. But that was an experience of the teacher, you know, and sometimes his actions are inscrutable, but the way you judge his actions, how does it help you? What's happening in terms? Can you feel changes and more awareness and more growth? And if so, he's doing his job. Well, think about it. Yeah, I thought about that one a lot. So I guess we're running out of time. But thank you for showing up for this discussion and participating. And it's a very interesting topic and challenging in a lot of ways. And so here's Daryl to about the future.
Yeah, the future. That's my job, always the future. Yeah, so next week will be, as we've been doing for the last couple months, we do the satsang and then we do the meditation. So next week we will be gathering for meditation on this very subject, topic.
And maybe sort of launch a little exploration inside, looking for the guru within. Great.
So we can unmute and say goodnight and say thank you and whatever else you can say as we sign off.
Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Lots to think about.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks.